What is up, everybody? This is your boy, Teran Rodriguez, bringing you another edition of Set Point. We have ourselves a busy Sunday for you all, as we have a lot to get into in NCAA and professional men's volleyball, as NCAA men's volleyball team was busy, as we had 6 upsets, including 4 upsets in one day. How about Stanford taking down USC? The Cardinal does it again against Southern California. Woo, Nelly. And how about Concordia upsetting Grand Canyon in straight sets? Absolutely amazing. And how about Princeton and George Mason upsetting NJIT? What happened to the Highlanders, and can they bounce back after this? We've got a big week in NCAA men's volleyball as Hawaii and Long Beach clash with one another, and USC and UCLA clash with one another. Also, the NBA is drawing near as the schedule is released, and next week starts the NBA. So hand me a volleyball. Set the net. I'm about to serve you up some volleyball action on Set Point. This is Teran Rodriguez bringing you another edition of Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. And welcome all to another edition of Set Point. Thank you all for joining me on this beautiful Sunday afternoon. I promise you all, this will probably be the last Sunday I will be going live with Set Point, just because my life has been a bit of a whirlwind, but now we are starting to get it all calmed down. So I appreciate you all bearing with me. So without any further delay, let's get on into that beautiful volleyball action that we all know and love. But first and foremost, we have a word from our sponsors. IE Sports Radio is proud to call the Southern California Warriors our official sponsor of IE Sports Radio. The world of semi-pro sports is unlike any other sports organization. Players pay to play in the hopes of so many different outcomes, whether it's playing to get filmed to try out for professional teams, big-time colleges, or just playing to stay in shape. No matter what, all semi-pro players have one thing in common, and that's playing for the love of the game. The SoCal Warriors have been on a quest to earn titles since 2017 and give second chances to every football player that is willing to continue to play the sport of football. Whether you're in Southern California or anywhere in the world, give semi-pro sports a chance if you love your sport. You may get that second chance you've been waiting for as an athlete. You can follow them on Twitter at SoCal Warriors, on Instagram at SouthernCalifornia_Warriors, and on Facebook by typing in the word Southern, then California, then Warriors. And definitely do follow IE Sports Radio, which is on Twitter and Instagram at IE Sports Radio, and on Facebook by typing in the word IE, then Sports, then Radio. They also have their website, www.iesportsradio.com, and when you go there, there will be a Patreon link with 5 different tiers, with the first one starting off at $5 a month. This donation gets you a shout-out from all 31 of our shows, and higher tiers include IE Sports Radio merchandise, such as hats, t-shirts, and sweaters, to being able to access IESRU, the podcasting university of IE Sports Radio, and even a chance to be featured on a segment of our flagship show, The Defining Moment, with Larry B. Because for the past 7.5 years, IE Sports Radio has been bringing you amazing content, ranging from interviewing legendary athletes to building tailor-made shows dedicated to all major sports cities around the country. All the while, we've been by the fans and for the fans, and we continue to be by the fans and for the fans. And with your help, we are ready to take the next biggest step. Thank you, everyone, for continuing to make IE Sports Radio your direct feed for all that sports. Big shout out to our Patreon supporters, Marcus Losgrade and Bay Area Raised Apparel. We definitely appreciate your support. And also, a shout out to the IE Sports Radio Fan of the Month. Her name is at Marcy Vargas. She is a Green Bay Packers fan hailing from Mexico. Her full Twitter is at Marcy_Vargas88. So definitely do give her a follow and a shout out. Also, the NFL draft is right around the corner, and iSports Radio is excited to announce its third annual mock draft challenge. The rules are simple. Predict all 32 first-round picks. No trades, no modifications, no pass and go, no collecting $200, no eating after 11 p.m., no swimming after eating. You get the point. The participant who has the best mock draft will receive a shout-out on all of our shows on IE Sports Radio and their choice of an IE Sports Radio hat or t-shirt. For more information or to submit your mock draft, please reach out to Mike Pat at letswine_IESR. His Twitter information is in the description, so definitely do reach out to him if you can. And best of luck to those that are participating. And then March is the home of March Madness. And are you able to watch the game but you can't, but you have access to Mixlr? Well, then IE Sports Radio, USRN, and USRN2, as well as Wellington Sports Radio, has got you covered, as they will be broadcasting all of the Final Four games coming up, not just on the men's side, but on the women's side as well. As long as you have the Mixlr app, you are able to access USRN, USRN2, Wellington Sports Radio, and IE Sports Radio. So now that is all out of the way, let us get on into the volleyball action. So we had ourselves quite a number of upsets from last week. We had 6 of them. So for the first one, this was kind of an underwhelming upset, but this was kind of somewhat expected because these two teams actually met with one another, and the underdog kind of pulled off the upset the first time around. This was McKendree versus Loyola of Chicago, and before I continue on, I just got to say that last week I was unable to do the AVCA Top 25 Coaches Poll for March 21st, but there were no changes. Everything was still the same. NJIT was at 15, Stanford was at 14, UC Irvine 13, Lewis 12, Loyola of Chicago 11, UC San Diego 10, Grand Canyon 9, Ball State 8, Pepperdine 7, UC Santa Barbara 6, USC 5, Hawaii 4, Long Beach State 3, Penn State 2, and UCLA number 1. So it was basically the same as the previous week. So back to the recap. So McKendree took on Loyola for a second time, as Loyola trying to avenge an early season loss to McKendree early on. As we say hello to Courtney Harden in the chat room. He says, "What's up, T-Rod?" He's got to get me back on his show, The Real Deal with Courtney Harden. I hear that. I've got Saturdays off more times than not, so I'll definitely try to reach out to you on that. But back to McKendree versus Loyola. Loyola actually lost to McKendree early on in conference play, as that was actually the only conference loss for Loyola this season. It actually came via a reverse sweep. Loyola went up 2-0, and then McKendree reverse swept them, breaking Loyola's heart and handing them their first loss of the season, and also wiping away what was a big win over Ball State. This time around, Loyola had the home court, as McKendree did not care about that. Loyola led throughout all of the first set, and they led by as many as 6 at 12-6. They even had 2 set points at 24-23 and 25-24. But unfortunately, they could not convert those set points. McKendree took its first lead of the set at 26-25, and they eventually won the set 28-26 on its second set point from a kill from Ethan Carroll. The second set saw McKendree lead throughout most of the set, and they led by as many as 5, leading 11-6. But Loyola tied it up at 17-17, and eventually the two were tied up at 19-19. McKendree, however, scored 3 straight points en route to taking the second set 25-21, and everyone in Chicago was stunned. McKendree was indeed the real deal. I've been saying it before, and I'll say it again. McKendree is probably the most underappreciated team that isn't ranked in NCAA men's volleyball. And everyone in Chicago, everyone in the Gentile arena was stunned if they were a Loyola fan. But in set 3, after it was tied 1-1, Loyola was in no danger whatsoever, as they had 0 hitting errors that set. That was what really swung the momentum back to Loyola. They took the third set in dominating fashion, 25-13, So once again, they had 0 hitting errors, 14 kills, and they hit .424. Now the fourth set, it was tight throughout the first half of that set up until 15-15. The biggest lead of that set was 2 points, and at 16-16, Loyola went on a 4-0 run, which basically gave them the set. They never looked back as they won that fourth set 25-22, and every Rambler fan in Gentile Arena was rocking. Now the fifth set, Loyola led 2-0 early on, but McKendree scored 5 straight points to go ahead 5-2. Loyola unfortunately did not get any closer than 12-9, as basically McKendree had control of the set after they were down 2-0. Eventually, McKendree won the fifth set 15-10, pulling off the upset for a second straight time, and the upset was on in Illinois. So McKendree was led by Patrick Ross and Ethan Carroll, who each had 17 kills. Kevin Shuley chipped in 16 kills. McKendree hit .338 for the match, and they also got 13 digs from Ryan Serrano and Patrick Ross, respectively. And they also got 12 kills from Kevin Shuley. They also got 8 digs from Francisco Comas, and I said 13 digs from Patrick Ross and Ryan Serrano, and 12 digs for Kevin Shuley. If I said kills, my apologies. Loyola was led by Cole Schlotthauer, who had 18 kills. Parker Van Buren chipped in 17 kills, and Andrew Lyons added 10 kills with a hitting percentage of .625, which was pretty impressive. Should also make note that Shuley's hitting percentage was also impressive. He hit .464, while Carroll hit .363. Garrett Zolg stuffed the stat sheet with 54 assists, 16 digs, and 4 kills, as Loyola as a whole had 7 service aces, 3 of which went to Schlotthauer. And Loyola hit .299, which wasn't bad, and it's rather impressive, but they didn't really, prevent McKendree from having a big night of their own. Because when you're giving up 300, it's not pretty. On other notes for McKendree, Patrick Ross, following that match, had 895 kills, and he is third all-time at McKendree behind Nolan Reuter, who has 933 kills, and Jared Wilcox, who had 909 kills. Ross needs, at the time, he needed 38 kills to tie the record and 39 to break the record. And I think he might get that opportunity just because McKendree has some big-time matches coming up, and then they've also got the MIVA tournament. But this just goes to show how good McKendree is. They are so underrated, and they may have Loyola's number. We'll have to see going forward. Now, heading on over to the West Coast, we had ourselves a big upset here. We had BYU at number 7 Pepperdine. Now, BYU has had themselves quite a season to forget, as honestly, they have taken a huge fall from grace. Huge fall from grace from last year. They graduated over half their roster, and they just could not find that big breakout win that they were hoping for. Against Pepperdine, this was a rematch of the MPSF championship from last year. Set 1, Pepperdine led by as many as 5, leading 18-13, and then they also led 19-14. But then BYU, being as resilient as they are, tied it up at 19-19. And then Pepperdine also had 4 set points, but they couldn't convert. Meanwhile, BYU had 4 set points of their own, and they won off of a Pepperdine hitting error, winning the first set 32-30. There were 8 ties, surprisingly, but Pepperdine controlled most of that set up until the later stages, as credit to BYU, they were resilient as heck. Second set, BYU led. This was actually quite the opposite. BYU led a good chunk of the set, leading by as many as 5. But Pepperdine, using a 4-0 run, trailing 18-16, eventually took the lead at 20-18, and they never looked back as they took the second set 25-21. Then the third set, BYU jumped out to an 8-4 lead after using a 5-0 run after trailing 4-3. And BYU also led 18-14, and it looked as if Pepperdine was pretty much dead in the water in that set. Pepperdine burnt both of its timeouts, but Pepperdine, to their credit, used a 6-0 run to make the score 20-18, and they used an 11-2 run overall after trailing 18-14 to take the third set 25-20. That was a big set for Pepperdine. Keep in mind this was played at Firestone Fieldhouse in Malibu, and it looked as if Pepperdine was getting themselves right. Right? Wrong. BYU led 7-1 as they were looking to extend the match. Pepperdine, when trailing 12-11, used a 4-0 run to take its first lead of the game and go ahead 15-12. But BYU regained the lead by breaking a 16-16 tie and scoring 3 straight points to put itself up 19-16. They also put themselves up 24-20, and it looked as if we were heading to a fifth set. But credit to Pepperdine, they came back with 4 straight points to tie it up, and BYU had 7 set points, but they just couldn't convert. Meanwhile, for Pepperdine, they retook the lead at 28-27, and they had 2 match points to try to close it out and send everyone home happy, but they just could not convert. And then on BYU's 8th set point, they won off of a block at the net as they won the 4th set 31-29, forcing a 5th set. Everyone in Pepperdine was stunned. Everyone in BYU, every Cougar fan was rather happy. They were impressed as heck. Now, the 5th set, BYU never trailed as it was tied 2-2 as they went on an 8-2 run following that 2-2 tie to lead 10-4. And that was their biggest lead of the set as they eventually never looked back as they won the 5th set 15-9, pulling off the upset. BYU was led by David Gardini and Capono Brown, who each had 15 kills, while Mix Romanis had 14 kills and he hit 407. As a team, BYU hit only 280, which wasn't bad, but it kind of just goes to show how young BYU is and how much firepower they lost to graduation. Now, this was the mind-blowing stat. BYU had a whopping 15 service aces, 5 of which came from Gardini and Brown, who also had 10 digs apiece. So they were pretty much even when it came to their statistics overall, for the most part. And then, obviously, the blocks were big for BYU. They had 13 blocks compared to Pepperdine's 9, which was quite big for the Cougars. Pepperdine was led by Jalen Jasper, the leading suspect, who had 20 kills. He hit 293. Jacob Steele added 15 kills and hit 480. As a team, Pepperdine hit 273, which isn't really natural for them, especially when they're the number 7 team in the nation. Bryce Dvorak, Mr. Stat Stuffer, added 11 digs, 4 service aces, but he missed 7 serves, and he chipped in 46 assists. So as a team, this was obviously a disappointing loss for Pepperdine. This hurts their chances of winning the regular season title and getting that number 1 seed for the MPSF tournament. But they did bounce back in the second meeting as Pepperdine swept BYU as Jalen Jasper totaled 8 digs. Now, you're probably wondering, why is that so special? Why is Jalen Jasper totaling 8 digs so special? Because he equaled the team total that BYU had in terms of digs overall. It was quite amazing, honestly. I was like, it was almost too bad to be true, honestly. But I gotta give Pepperdine credit. They bounced back in a big way at Firestone Fieldhouse. And honestly, they needed that win because another loss would have hurt their confidence going forward, especially when it's crucial times in conference play. And conference play regular season is winding down. Another upset in the MPSF, which I kind of predicted would somewhat happen, was number 5 USC taking on Stanford. USC, knowing how important this matchup is just because USC has a big date with UCLA. Stanford coming off of a split against UCLA, which no one really predicted. So the first set, Stanford meant 100% business. When you play at Maples Pavilion, you got to be ready. Stanford's crowd is going to be rocking. Maples Pavilion is such a tough place to win at. And when Stanford is at Maples, they're just tough to stop. They never trailed. There were no ties. Stanford just had all the answers for USC. They won the first set 25-19. And I was very surprised USC just looked so out of it in that first set. Now, the second set was a whole nother story. USC only trailed once, 1-0. The rest of the way, USC took charge, never trailed, and both teams combined for a whopping 12 missed serves as USC took the second set 25-20, as it looked as if it was a little bit more expected of a matchup after that. So, With the set tied at 1-1, it was tight early on as all 7 ties came before either team cracked 10 points. But at 9-9, Stanford went on a 4-0 run, and USC got no closer than 3 points. That just goes to show you how underrated Stanford is. They're not having the greatest season in MPSF, but they're playing spoiler to some of these teams, as they took that third set 25-15, as it was quite the beatdown. I was very surprised to see Stanford just whooping USC in that set. Now, the fourth set, it was tight early on. Both teams kept trading away the lead. USC had the lead, then Stanford had the lead, then USC had the lead. USC led 15-12, but Stanford eventually tied it up at 18-18, and the two teams found themselves tied up at 22-22. USC had a set point at 24-23, but they could not close the deal. Stanford did need 3 match points to do it, and they were able to do so off of a kill from arguably the guy that I don't think USC saw getting the kill, Nathan Letsky, as he got the assist from Will Rotman. So the fact that USC didn't really have that man covered is kind of head-scratching. But for Stanford, that was the upset. They won the fourth set 28-26 as number 14 Stanford pulls off another top 5 win, this time against USC. And you got to like Stanford and its effort. Now, something that really stood out to me for Stanford, in sets 3 and 4, so after the second set, which Stanford kind of got rolled in, Stanford did not have a single hitting error going forward. That was what really was impressive to me. To not have a single hitting error in sets 3 and 4 after losing a set like that, in which you only led once, is very impressive. It really just goes to show how good Stanford is, how underrated they are. They have a lot of good players on their team. Will Rotman is a beast. He had 20 kills. All in all for Stanford, they only had 8 hitting errors. Luke Turner chipped in 11 kills. He hit 667. Rotman hit 436. Kevin Lamp chipped in 9 kills. He hit 368. And all in all for Stanford, it really shows how good they are. They limited USC to only 5 blocks. Matter of fact, Turner, Rotman, and Letsky each had 5 solo blocks, which equaled the entire USC blocking team, as USC as a whole had 5 blocks overall. Stanford as a whole added 10 blocks, as they had 5 solo stuffs, 10 block assists to total out to 10 blocks overall. And Stanford outdug USC 31-27. That wasn't the stat that stood out to me. So obviously the 2 sets where they had 0 hitting errors was incredible. But Stanford hitting 480 was also incredible. And even when USC hit 327, Stanford really impressed. I was very impressed with how Stanford played this match and how they didn't let USC, with all those talented players such as Simon Gauss, who had 22 kills, Sam Coburn, who had 16 kills, the list goes on, they did not get intimidated by USC. And I think Stanford could play spoiler to a majority of these teams in the MPSF. Like, Stanford might not be the team you want to face in the MPSF tournament, just because they have a lot of heart. Remember, this is a program that nearly got shut down just because of budget cuts. However, Stanford men's volleyball is back up and running, and they are not to be trifled with. For USC, however, they won the second meeting 3-1. They dropped the first set but won the next 3, as USC finds themselves behind UCLA in the MPSF standings going into this week. That was a big win for Stanford, earning the split against the Trojans. Now, this was probably the biggest upset in the MPSF. Grand Canyon versus Concordia. Now, Concordia being the small school that it is, and this is no offense to them, I didn't even know that they were playing Grand Canyon. I forgot Grand Canyon was even having a series against Concordia. But this really opened my eyes. So the set 1, Concordia only trailed once, 2-1. After that, they never trailed again, and they never allowed the set to get tied up again. They led by as many as 6, but to Grand Canyon's credit, they got within 2, trailing 21-19. But the Eagles didn't let up, and they took the opening set 25-21. Keep an eye out for this guy, Owen Chun. This kid was phenomenal in this match. Now, set 2 was a heck of a set. Concordia led by as many as 7, leading 13-6. 13-6. And they led all the way up to 23 points. But unfortunately for them, they led 23-20, but Grand Canyon came back with 4 straight points to lead 24-23, taking the first lead of the set. And all the ties came in when it was tied at 23-23. The set was tied 12 times. All those ties came at 23-23 after that. And it took Grand Canyon 8 set points. They had 8 set points. I repeat, Grand Canyon had 8 set points, but they could not close the deal. This had to have been head-scratching for Grand Canyon fans. Concordia had 4 set points, and they won the set off of a hitting error from Grand Canyon, as Concordia went up 2-0 after taking the second set, 36-34. I've seen some close sets, but honestly, not as close as that. Like, my goodness. Like, Grand Canyon probably looked at the film and were wondering, how the heck did we miss that many opportunities to even the match at 1-1? Because if Grand Canyon takes that second set, it's a whole different perspective. They're probably feeling good after making that comeback, after trailing most of the set, and they're also feeling good after winning a close set such as set 2, but I think that kind of knocked the wind out of their sails. Now, for the third set, it was tight early on. Grand Canyon actually led 13-8, and they led via a 3-0 run after they were up 10-8. But Concordia came back to tie the set at 15-15 with a 7-2 run following trailing 13-8. GCU did lead 20-17, but Concordia tied it up with 3 straight points, so it was 20-20. GCU surprisingly led 23-21, and it looked as if set 3 was theirs, but Concordia scored the next 3 points off of a Grand Canyon service error, a kill from Owen Chun, and a GCU hitting error to put them at match point. And then at that one match point, Chun won the match for them off of a service ace, and the celebration was on as Concordia knocked off number 9 Grand Canyon in straight sets. This was played in Irvine, yes, but I was so surprised that a talented team like Grand Canyon fell to Concordia. I had to do a double take on that. I'm like, wait a minute. Concordia beat Grand Canyon? It was just very mind-blowing, if you ask me. As Owen Chun led the way with 24 kills, he actually had over half of Concordia's kills. He also had 4 service aces, and he hit .537. Jonathan Carlson added 9 kills for Concordia, who hit .383. And Concordia also got 7 service aces, all of which came from Carlson and Chun, who also chipped in 9 digs. Grand Canyon was led by Camden Gianni, who had 17 kills. He hit .273, while Christian Janke chipped in 13 kills, and he hit .526. Hugo Fisher added 10 kills, as Grand Canyon hit .362, which was very surprising. But unfortunately for them, they just could not pull out that close set in set 2. Like, if they win that second set, and if they possibly win that third set, they're feeling good going forward. But unfortunately, this was just an ugly loss for them. Like, every game in the MPSF is precious. I know the MPSF tournament anyone can beat anyone, but you look at what Grand Canyon has on their dish going forward. They still have USC, and honestly, I don't know if Grand Canyon can win that matchup. They did take down Concordia in the second matchup as the Lopes dropped the first set, but just like the USC-Stanford match, they won the next 3. So for Concordia, it was rather impressive that they pulled off the win. Honestly, I think Concordia is showing their true potential. I think Concordia is an underrated team. They don't have the horses like some of these other teams do, but the fact that they were able to win that matchup the first night is very impressive. They really defended home court well. And for Grand Canyon, it's kind of back to the drawing board for them. They're going to have to learn to play out of their comfort zone, regardless of who their opponent is. So now we move on to the last upset of Friday. That was the third upset on Friday. So the fourth upset on Friday. Let's head up east to the EIVA. where NJIT took on Princeton. Number 15, NJIT, riding high with some good wins, good results, as NJIT looking to try to keep pace with Penn State. As we welcome Larry B into the chat room, he says, volley frickin' ball. Yes, volley frickin' ball, Larry. So the first set, NJIT led 23-21 as, I'm sorry, my apologies. I'm looking at the wrong one. They actually played George Mason the first match. So George Mason played NJIT, and Larry asks, has NJIT been good this season? I want to say it's a mixture. They've had some mixed results. Yes and no. To answer Larry's question, NJIT has had an underrated season. I don't think they're bad in any sort of way. I saw them against Long Beach State. They were resilient as heck. Against Penn State, they looked really... They were ready to go against Penn State. And they've only lost one home game all season long. So NJIT is having an underrated season, but this weekend was probably their worst weekend. So NJIT played George Mason on Friday as NJIT led 23-21, considering I'm actually skipping forward from the most of the set because there were a lot of ties. There were 18 ties in that opening set. We all thought that the Concordia versus Grand Canyon set 2 was the crazy set, but this was the crazy set of the weekend. So NJIT led 23-21, but George Mason scored the next 3 points to give them set point at 24-23. Now, we all are scratching our head at how Grand Canyon had 8 set points but couldn't convert. NJIT had 9 set points after trailing 24-23, but they could not close the deal. They had 9 straight set points, but they just could not seal the deal, as George Mason had 4 set points of their own as they won the set off of an NJIT hitting error, winning the first set by a whopping 38-36. That must have taken 10 years off of George Mason fans. Now, for the second set, it was just as tight. There were 10 ties, 3 lead changes. Through the first 22 points, neither team led by 1 point. George Mason used a 3-0 run after it was tied at 11-11 to lead 14-11, and they never trailed again as they took the second set 25-21, and NJIT fans who made the trip up to Fairfax, Virginia, were probably scratching their head wondering, what the heck is this NJIT team? I think NJIT is kind of the equivalent of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And that's no knock on NJIT because they do have a good team. They are very scrappy and resilient, but I'm just not sure what happened against George Mason. Like, George Mason came in with a record of 8-11, and they were 3-6 in EIVA conference play. Now, the third set was a whole lot better for NJIT. They never trailed in the set, and their only tie occurred when it was 7-7. They went on a 4-0 run after that, and they never let George Mason get any closer than 2, as NJIT led by as many as 6 and won the third set 25-20. Now, set 4 was a little bit of another story. NJIT led 6-3 early on, but George Mason took the lead at 8-7, and they eventually led 12-8. George Mason also led 15-11, but credit to NJIT, they tied it up at 17-17, and they eventually took the lead at 21-20. But George Mason scored 4 straight points off of 3 kills in a row and then an NJIT error, giving them match point. Despite needing 2 match points, George Mason clinched it off of an NJIT service error, winning the match and knocking off number 15 NJIT. Probably George Mason's biggest win of the season, considering they've had themselves quite the up and down, considering George Mason has not had themselves a great year. George Mason was led by Jack Bowles, who had 21 kills. He had 292, while Omar Hoyos had 12 kills. He probably would have liked to have a better night as he had 9 hitting errors and only hit 100, but he did get help from Richie Hoff, who had 9 kills. George Mason as a whole hit a not-so-good 217, but they did get 14 digs from Colin Heath. And George Mason, despite being outblocked, they registered 12 blocks as a whole. They also had 6 service aces compared to NJIT's 5. And all in all, it was kind of a surprising matchup. They hit 300 in the first 2 sets, and then the next 2 sets they cooled off. And set 4, they hit an abysmal 67, which is not good. Like, I feel bad for George Mason. I really feel bad for George Mason of having such a rotten season, but this win is definitely a feather in their cap, especially since the EIVA has been ran by Penn State. Most of the years, of course. NJIT was led by Alessandro Negri and Julian Meisner, who each had 13 kills. Martin De Chavaria and Jens Feltras also chipped in 9 kills. So it wasn't a one-man show. It was basically a balanced effort. It would have been great to see Feltas and De Chavaria get more kills, but what can you do? Negri chipped in 10 digs as NJIT outblocked George Mason 16-12 as NJIT also hit 234. Now, just like George Mason, they were strong in the first 2 sets. Well, the first set they hit 239. Second set NJIT hit 435, and then the third set they hit 300. I thought that NJIT would have done better in that second set. But then the fourth set, NJIT had themselves a nightmare of a set. They hit 0 while totaling 7 hitting errors. All in all, for NJIT, this was probably one of those matches where they just have to flush down the toilet. I know them traveling is tough, but still, you got to win on the road if you want to be successful. Like, you're going to need to, you want to become champion, you got to get out of your comfort zone of playing at New Jersey. You got to win on the road against some of these other tough teams. Because it's not just Penn State that's good. Like, the entire EIVA is back to being just as good. Just because Princeton and Harvard have come back from their yearly cancellation of all sports. So for Princeton and Harvard, they're getting their sea legs back. And NJIT has to realize that it's not just going to be them and Penn State. Now, obviously, Penn State has been really good as they clinched a spot in the EIVA playoffs. It's actually a 16 playoff, so Penn State is guaranteed a spot in the playoffs regardless of what happens. Speaking of Princeton for NJIT, that was the last matchup, or the last upset of the weekend as NJIT took on Princeton. Now, Princeton, going into this match, had seven wins in the EIVA and 6 losses, and they were 7-12 overall. They only had 1 win outside of their conference, which speaks to high volumes of how rusty Princeton is, and it really sucks. I feel bad for Princeton that they're very rusty and they just could not get the results that they were looking for. However, by the way, I believe that Princeton win came at the hands of UC San Diego. But against NJIT, it was a whole different story. So, for all the sets that Princeton won, they never trailed. Starting with set 1, they never trailed in the opening set as they jumped out to an early 4-0 lead. As, once again, this was played in Princeton, New Jersey in the Dillon Gymnasium. And to the credit of NJIT, they shook off the rust and the slow start, and they tied the set at 10-10. With the set being tied at 18-18, Princeton scored 5 straight points to take the opening set 25-21. Princeton just really meant business. And then the second set, it was tight early on, despite Princeton leading as many as 3 most of the way. All 7 ties came in the first 18 points. So basically, both teams totaling 18 points, there were just all 7 ties. Because there were 7 ties and no lead changes. And then after both teams were tied up at 9-9, Princeton went on a 6-0 run to build its biggest lead of the set and eventually take the second set 25-19. And NJIT got no closer than 3. As for the second straight match, they were down 0-2. And everyone from Newark, every NJIT fan was probably wondering, what the heck is this NJIT team? Why is this team not underperforming? So then the third set, Princeton was looking for the sweep as they led early on, but NJIT took the first lead of the set, leading 9-8. They led by as many as 3 despite Princeton's best efforts to try to tie the set. But Princeton retook the lead at 19-18, putting every NJIT fan on pins and needles. It was tied up at 21-21 eventually when NJIT scored the next 2 points, only to see Princeton do the same. So tied up at 23-23, NJIT needed 2 set points, but they eventually got the third set as they clinched it off of a Princeton hitting error, winning set 3, 26-24, and keeping the Highlanders in the match. But then the fourth set, Princeton never trailed at any point, and the only time it was tied was at 3-3. And leading 7-6, they pulled away by using a 5-0 run and never looking back as they built their biggest lead of the set at 8, and they eventually took the fourth set 25-17, securing the upset over number 15 NJIT. So this was definitely a weekend to forget for NJIT. They were led by Julian Meisner, who had 21 kills. Alessandro Negri chipped in 9 kills. Martin T. Javaria added 8 kills, and Carson Williams added 7 kills. As a team, NJIT hit 239, which, again, that's probably not what they were looking for. Princeton, on the other hand, had a much better night. They were led by James Hartley, who had 21 kills. He hit 412. Ben Harrington added 12 kills, and Parker Dixon added 10 kills. As a team, Princeton hit 337, which is quite impressive, as they also got 8 kills from Gavin Lasing, who chipped in a hitting percentage of 636. Now, this was the stat that really stood out to me. Princeton outblocked NJIT by a whopping 15 to 10.5. That is what's going to help you win those matches. And credit to Princeton. They defend their home gym. For NJIT, on the other hand, this just goes to show that the EIVA is not your grandma's conference. It's a really talented conference, very underrated, and all these teams are going to come ready to play. It's not just Penn State that you have to worry about. You have to actually beat other teams in your conference. And as a result of losing to both George Mason and Princeton, NJIT has fallen out of second place as they have fallen behind Harvard, which, once again, just like Princeton, they are restarting their season after their season was canceled from last year. So for NJIT, they have to recollect themselves. They got to clean up their errors. They can't have Julian Meisner playing hero ball because the dude had 12 hitting errors against Princeton as well. They can't have that. It just cannot work like that. And I actually messed up the second and third set. So NJIT took the second set while Princeton took the third set, as it was a very close third set. And then the fourth set, Princeton won in dominating fashion. So it wasn't the second straight match. They were down 0-2. They were tied up at 1-1. And then the third set, Princeton took a very close set, which saw Princeton eventually took the fourth set in dominating fashion. So just got to recollect myself and correct myself right there. But all in all, it was just not a pretty win for NJIT. If they're going to have success in the EIVA tournament, they're going to have to play better volleyball than that. They cannot afford to lose to sub-500 teams, because if they can't beat those teams, they're certainly not going to have a chance against the Harvards and the Penn States. And if they get into the NCAA tournament, that's a big if, just because let's say NJIT wins the EIVA tournament. How far can they really go? Can they beat the Long Beach States or the UCLAs or the USCs or any team that comes out of that conference, or any team that comes out of their conference, or the Loyolas, or the list goes on and on? Can they really beat those teams? After this weekend, it really has me scratching my head. But honestly, I'm not ready to give up on NJIT just yet. I think NJIT just had their first bad weekend, and now they're just going to need to brush themselves off and just move on from it. And also, they cannot afford to look ahead to Penn State. Next week, this upcoming week, they do not play Penn State, but the following week, NJIT does play Penn State, which Penn State at this point has probably got the EIVA locked up. The only way Penn State doesn't win the EIVA is if they basically stop playing volleyball and then Harvard just straight up runs the table. And even Harvard isn't having the best season out there. They are 9-9, and they're 7-3 in conference. So the only way Penn State loses the regular season conference title is if Penn State loses out, Harvard wins out, and that just is a thing. So yeah, it would be crazy to see NJIT winning the EIVA. I think NJIT has that potential. My only problem is that are they consistent against stiffer competition? And that's kind of the problem with playing in the EIVA. I'm not trying to say the EIVA is not good, but you compare them to the Big West with Hawaii, Long Beach State, UC Santa Barbara, and even UC San Diego. You compare the MPSF, which has UCLA, USC, Pepperdine, Grand Canyon, and even Stanford, and even BYU and Concordia. And then you also compare them to the MIVA, where Loyola's good, Ball State is having a fantastic season, Lewis is somewhat underrated, even though I could say the opposite of them. McKendree is vastly underrated, and even Purdue Fort Wayne is good. So for NJIT, the question for me is, can they really stack up to the competition that they face off against? My answer to my own question would probably be no, but I think they can turn it around. They're not gonna miss the EIVA tournament because 6 teams can only get in. I'm pretty sure they'll be amongst the top 3. I'm pretty sure they won't be seeing Penn State until the final. And if they do beat Penn State, in the regular season matchup, then bully for them. They did so last year. I think NJIT has that potential. I just think that they're still looking for that big breakout win that'll make people say NJIT is indeed a good team. So that is that for the NCAA men's volleyball week of week 12. Let's jump on into do a little bit of NCAA beach volleyball as UCLA continues to be undefeated and they pulled off some more wins. They haven't lost a match this season. As jumping to the collegiate beach coaches poll of the top 20 through 16 consists of Florida Gulf Coast at 20, FIU or Florida International at 19, Stetson at 18, Arizona at 17, and Pepperdine at 16. 15 through 11 consist of Long Beach State at 15, South Carolina at 14, Georgia State at 13, Cal Poly at 12, and Cal at 11. 10 through 6 consists of Florida Atlantic at 10, Hawaii at 9, Stanford at 8, Grand Canyon at 7, and LSU at 6. 5 through 1 consists of LMU or Loyola Marymount at 5, Florida State at 4, USC at 3, or Southern California in this case, TCU at 2, and number 1 is none other than UCLA. Yes, I'm not going to do the drum roll just because I basically kind of spoiled it that UCLA is still undefeated. But another team that's undefeated is TCU. Now, I was at first confused on why TCU jumped USC in the collegiate poll, or the coaches poll, but it kind of makes more sense. TCU is 24-0, while USC's one loss was to UCLA. Now, obviously, we don't know if USC and TCU would result in. I think it could go either way. USC is stacked with seniors, while TCU had a phenomenal year last year and is building off that. TCU just continues to have success, but the main kingpin or queen pin is UCLA, as Sophie Moore and Natalie Misowzinski are undefeated. And the crazy thing about them is that they're both freshmen. The fact that they're undefeated in their meets is absolutely amazing, and I really think that this UCLA team has depth all over. Now, I'm not trying to say UCLA is going to win it all, but I think that the Pac-12 could go through them. I think the only team in that Pac-12 that has any potential of taking down UCLA is USC. As much as I want to give Stanford and Cal a chance, I just don't think they have a chance. They don't have the horses to take down that talented UCLA team. And I think UCLA has a lot of unfinished business, especially since UCLA beat Stanford this weekend 4-1. And keep in mind, Stanford is number 8. They even beat number 17 Arizona 5-0. Now, coming up for UCLA is going to be a huge weekend. They have the Mapes Beach Invitational in Los Angeles, California, as they'll be playing at Mapes Beach. They'll take on TCU on Thursday, and then Hawaii the same day. And then they've got the UC Invitational 2 days after, as they'll take on Florida International, then TCU again, and then they have LSU. Now, the LSU matchup is also intriguing just because LSU played UCLA as close as they could. TCU is going to be a chess match between UCLA and TCU. And then you can't sleep on Florida International. Now, also jumping around from the beach volleyball scene on the NCAA side, there was the Big West Invitational, as there were some interesting results in that Invitational. Hawaii, number 9 Hawaii, fell to UC Davis 3-2. I was very surprised to see this result. I did not think that Hawaii was going to lose that matchup. I thought their only loss was going to be to Cal Poly, but for me, I was very surprised to see that. To Davis of all teams. Not to Long Beach State, not to Cal Poly, but to Davis. So, bully for UC Davis for pulling off that win. Long Beach State also had some impressive results as they swept, yes, they 5-0'd Cal Poly. I was very surprised to see Cal Poly getting 5-0'd by Long Beach State. But you also have to remember Long Beach State has played a very challenging schedule, which has consisted of USC, UCLA, Stanford. You get the point. Their only win, I think, prior to this whole thing, and prior to their first win overall was against Irvine Valley at junior college, which I don't really think that's a big win for Long Beach State, but what do I know? I'm not going to judge. So for Long Beach State to have a successful weekend at the Big West Invitational, it was quite impressive. Their only blemish came at the hands of Hawaii, losing 3-2, but losing to Hawaii is not that bad. I think that is a great that's actually a good loss considering they only lost 3-2. Like, Hawaii is perennially good, as well as Cal Poly, and for Long Beach State to walk away and say, we took the number 9 team in the nation to as close as we possibly can, and we 5-0'd the number 12 team, the reigning Big West Conference champions, is something to smile about if you're Long Beach State. So I think Long Beach State is starting to pick it up, and for me, I think that is a dangerous thing for the rest of the Big West Conference. I think Big West Conference play is going to be very interesting just because Cal Poly and Hawaii are kind of the class of the conference, as Hawaii barely beat Cal Poly in their matchup of the Big West Conference Invitational 3-2. And I think day 2 was a much more successful day for Hawaii, especially after losing that first game to UC Davis. So I think Hawaii has that potential, but against UCLA, I don't know. I don't think they're going to have the same success as they did this weekend, because now their level of talent jumps from mid-tier to practically S-tier. So there's that right there. I also have to give a shout-out to USC's Sammy Slater. She picked up her 100th career win, so good job to Sammy Slater. And that's huge, just because a couple weeks ago, Tina Gradina, who is participating in, I think it's some sort of beach volleyball championship, she collected her 100th win, and it was a big-time deal for Tina, just because she is Latvian, and she played for the Latvian team. She played for the Olympic team, which saw her finish in 4th place. And she was also named the Latvian Athlete of the Year, which I think definitely surprised her. I think Gradina is like in her early 20s. I want to say she's like 21, maybe 22. I'm not sure. But all I can say is that Tina Gradina is going to be a household name to watch for. and she's a senior, and for USC fans, I think everyone would want to see Tina Gradina, as well as some of the other USC seniors, go out with another championship, a back-to-back championship. But to do so, they're going to need to have some good results going forward. I think it's doable, but it still remains to be seen. So that's pretty much going to do it for the NCAA Beach Volleyball talk. So we're going to take ourselves a quick little commercial breaky break because we're near an hour. When we come back, we're going to have a breakdown of the NVA schedule. Yes, the NVA, as next week starts the NVA season. And then we have a preview of Week 13's matches in the NCAA men's volleyball scene. So you are listening to Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that sports. We'll be right back after this.
From the shores of the Puget Sound to the rushing waters of the Columbia River, stretching across the Great Cascades, and on IE Sports Radio lives the Northwest Territory Sports Show, hosted by me, Brad Buckingham. On this show, I cover all the great collegiate and professional sport teams that we have here in the Pacific Northwest. Of course, I'm talking about the Seattle Seahawks, Seattle Mariners, Sounders, and even the Seattle Kraken. But I can't forget all of that is good in Oregon either. I got the Trailblazers, the Oregon Ducks, the Beavers, even the Timbers, and much, much more. You can listen to the show every Sunday from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern, noon to 1 p.m. Pacific on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
What's up, sports fans? Are you looking for the latest on Northern California sports? Then take a trip out west with me, your host, Gina G, on Reppin' the NorCal Sports, right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. I'll be bringing it to you all the way live every Monday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. And it's always a packed show. I'll bring you everything Dynastic 49ers, the bite of the San Jose Sharks, torture of the San Francisco Giants, the Golden State Warriors that we still believe. Then take you across the bay to the rise and grind of the Oakland A's. I've got you covered on college ball from the Cal Bears to the Stanford Cardinal, so that no matter what, reppin' in NorCal sports is always reppin' the Bay. So if you bleed red and gold, or you're looking to keep an eye out west in them thar hills, don't miss me, Gina G, on reppin' in NorCal sports. Catch me every Monday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, and I'll have your fandom repped harder than a trio of defenders guarding Stephen Curry before his buzzer beater is Gucci.
What is going on, everybody? My name is Harrison Glazer, and we're coming at you from the Show That Never Sleeps podcast. I cover the Jets, the Islanders, the Nets, and the Yankees.
This is Pierre Moss, and I cover the Mets, Knicks, Rangers, and the Giants.
Our show is live every Wednesday through Spreaker and a bunch of other ways to get our content. Again, we're the Show That Never Sleeps podcast. We talk about all those New York sports. It's a lot of fun. We get into all of it. Please tune in. Again, that's Wednesdays at 6 p.m.
And we look forward to having you guys right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Back with segment number 2 of Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that sports. Definitely do check out all of those shows that just played. Northwest Territory Sports with Brad Buckingham goes on every Sunday. And himself a great show, and we are welcoming him back with open arms after a week off. Then we have Reppin' to NorCal Sports with Gina G, one of Set Point's biggest supporters. We appreciate her and all of her support. Her support does not go unnoticed, as she goes live every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific time, and then she also goes live with Casey Lima every Friday at 6 p.m. Pacific time. And then check out Pierre Moss with the Show That Never Sleeps podcast with Harrison Glazer every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Pacific time, 8 p.m. Eastern. It's always a fun show when it comes to those New York sports. Now let's jump back on into the volleyball action. So next up we have the NVA, and the NVA is now bigger than ever, as this was actually a press release that was just released, as now it's bigger. The NVA is bigger than ever. There are now 12 teams in each conference, or not 12 teams, 12 teams in this whole National Volleyball Association. And there's actually official conferences. There's the National Conference and the American Conference, which is awesome. So here's how the NVA regular season schedule will go. The first matches will start on April 8th through April 10th. So that basically is next weekend. Not this upcoming weekend where it's April 1st through April 3rd. It's April 8th through April 10th. Then event number 2 will be May 6th through May 8th. Then event 3 will be May 28th through May 30th. Event 4 will be June 17th to June 19th. And then event 5 will be July 8th to July 10th. And then the NVA Championship, or the playoffs, will be August 5th through August 7th. So we have ourselves some NVA material all the way until August, which is actually good just because it'll also be going hand in hand with the AVP. So it gives me some more material to keep Set Point going, and it's going to be fun times. It's not going to have the long-running season that the AVP is going to have, but it's great to see the NVA is growing, and having 12 teams is quite phenomenal. Some of the noteworthy matchups or the highlighted matchups include on the opening weekend, we have the Dallas Tornadoes versus the Colorado Kraken, and then we have the Las Vegas Ramblers against the Utah Stingers in the second event. And then we also have the OC Stunners versus the Texas Tyrants that same weekend on May 6th. And then on May 30th, we have the Chicago Untouchables against Southern Exposure. Then we have LA Blaze versus the Inland Empire Matadors. Yes, the Inland Empire Matadors return, as it's a crosstown rivalry. That'll be on June 19th. And then on June 30th, we have the New Jersey Freedom versus the Seattle Sasquatch. It's the battle of Northwest versus Northeast teams. And this weekend is the first, or not this weekend, the next weekend is the first weekend of volleyball when it comes to the NVA. And I'm really excited for it just because we go from one big weekend to another. And I really look forward to following the entire NVA season. And hopefully, I do know one of the NVA headsmen. I don't know how. Chairman, that's the name. I know one of the NVA chairmen that maybe I could have a guest on for Set Point when it comes to that. And I definitely want to get him on. I really want to, have him on as a guest. I'll try to work something out with him. We'll definitely see. And I really want to have my friend who is a chairman of the NVA, who's a part of an NVA team, on as a guest, and then maybe I'll have some other guests, because I told him I would like to talk some NVA, and I would like to talk some NVA with some of these NVA players. Also, I want to say our former guest, Nick Amato, isn't playing this season on the Orange County Stunners. I'd have to double check, but I'm not entirely sure. I'll have that confirmed next week. But I feel he's playing internationally. If Nick Amato isn't playing in the NVA and he is playing internationally, I wish him the best going forward. But if he is playing in the NVA, I can't wait to see him do big things. He was phenomenal last year. And honestly, I think the NVA is going to be back and better than ever. 12 teams overall, and they have 2 conferences. It's not just going to be one whole shebang. It's going to be 2 conferences. It's basically like the MLB, the NFL, the list goes on and on. So, all in all, I'm looking forward to the NVA season, and I'm excited for this. I'm excited for event number 1, and I'm excited to bring you all the action. So that is going to do it for NVA talk. Now let's jump on into some NCAA men's volleyball Week 13 action, and then I'll send you all on your way. So for the sneaky good matchups, we have a lot of good sneaky good matchups. So we'll start off with this matchup, UC Santa Barbara versus UC Irvine. That'll be on Wednesday and Friday. So the first matchup will feature the Gauchos taking on the Anteaters at Irvine on Wednesday, and then Friday, Irvine will be traveling to Santa Barbara to take on the Gauchos, which I think is going to be a fun little matchup right there. Santa Barbara needs to win the series because they lost both of their matches to Long Beach State this past weekend. They lost the first one in 4 sets. After they won the first set, they got ousted in the next 3 sets. And then at Santa Barbara, they got swept, which was very surprising. I don't think anyone predicted Santa Barbara getting swept at home. Unless you were a Long Beach State fan, of course. But even I wouldn't predict that. But I digress. So for UC Santa Barbara, they pretty much have to run the table if they want to be the number 1 seed of the Big West Conference tournament. As we welcome Adam Karnick in the chat room, he says, good evening. Thank you for popping in the chat room, Adam. I talked a little about Loyola earlier on, but I am totally down. But Loyola of Chicago talk will be coming up momentarily. I also talked Concordia of Irvine talk, just because I know you're a Concordia of Chicago alum or something along those lines. Regardless, there will be talk of Chicago men's volleyball. Speaking of which, we have MIVA action happening in the sneaky good matchups. We have Lewis at Ball State on Saturday. Now, Ball State leads the MIVA, but I think this is going to be the toughest week for Ball State this week, as they lead Loyola of Chicago by 1 full game. Also have to keep in mind Ball State lost to Loyola, and honestly, for Ball State, they're going to need to go 2-0 this week. I'll get into who their second opponent is. That's early on in the week, a little bit later. But Lewis is kind of, and I hate to say this, they're kind of underwhelming. I think they're underrated. I feel that could be a potential trap game for Ball State, especially when after they play Ball State the following week, they play Loyola. I want to say that's their next matchup after this week, but honestly, they have to be ready for Lewis. Ball State is having a phenomenal year. They've only lost 2 matches overall. And yes, after they play Lewis, the following week they play Loyola of Chicago, at Loyola of Chicago. So for Ball State, they have to take care of business against Lewis and their previous opponent. That's also going to be mentioned coming up. So for Ball State, they have to play to their competition. They swept Lewis the first go-around, and you also have to remember that Lewis is ranked despite them not being as good as they are, or being as good as they are on paper, they are ranked and they have to be respected, and I feel Ball State could get a challenge from Lewis, but I think Ball State will be ready. Now, for Lewis, if they beat Ball State, first of all, Loyola of Chicago fans will be sending them gift baskets, but it would be a good morale booster for them just because they split their weekend as they lost to Loyola of Chicago but beat Purdue of Fort Wayne. I don't see Lewis winning the regular season conference title, but I think they can do damage in the conference championship. We'll have to see. So there's that little matchup right there. And then the last sneaky good matchup or sneaky good series this weekend is Stanford at Grand Canyon. Now, Grand Canyon obviously had an interesting weekend. They lost to Concordia in straight sets in the first match, but then they won the second match 3-1. Against Stanford, this kind of has Stanford winning one match written all over it. But now Stanford has to move out of its comfort zone of playing at Maples Pavilion and heading down to Arizona to take on the Lobes. Now, I think Stanford has talent. I think Will Rotman is playing well, Luke Turner is playing well, Kevin Lamp is playing well. I think Stanford has the potential of pulling off the upset, if we can call it that, considering I could see Grand Canyon dropping out of the top 10. But we'll see. So all in all, for Grand Canyon and Stanford, I think it's going to be a sneaky good matchup right there, just because these are two teams that probably will not win the regular season conference championship. Stanford pretty much isn't going to win the regular season conference championship unless, of course, craziness happens. So for Grand Canyon, they have to realize they have that true potential. They can't just have Camden Gianni just carrying the team every single night. It just does not work like that. It just doesn't. So that is that little matchup right there for the sneaky good matchups. Now for the actual matches to watch for. Starting on Thursday, we have McKendree at Ball State. Now this is the big-time opponent that Ball State has to really be careful of. McKendree pulled off the upset win over Loyola last week. I would not be surprised to see McKendree pulling off another upset if Ball State does not respect McKendree. If Ball State comes into this match thinking, oh, we're better than McKendree, we're so good, we don't need to go all out, that will be a recipe for disaster for Ball State. Just because Ball State does have, they have a win over McKendree, but honestly, McKendree is playing such great volleyball as of late. And it's kind of interesting to see how they'll do against McKendree. They won at McKendree in 4 sets, but now they play at Ball State. And for Ball State, I think it would be quite interesting to see if they could beat McKendree a second time. Because again, McKendree is playing some very good volleyball. Coming off of a win over Loyola of Chicago for a second time, it's really impressive. And Ball State, now they know they control their own destiny when it comes to getting that number 1 seed. They have to do their part in winning out, because if they win out, they're the number 1 seed, and they won't have to face Loyola until the championship. And they know how good the MIVA is as well. It's not just one team that's good. All these teams are good. I think McKendree could be a dark horse to win said conference tournament. So for McKendree, I could see them pulling off the win. It is going to be tough winning on the road, but they just won in Loyola, but they won't have the luxury of playing in Illinois. They'll have to go to Indiana to take on Ball State, but I think it's going to be a great matchup between the Cardinals and the Bearcats. Muncie is going to be rocking, and we'll see if Ball State can avoid the upset. If McKendree wins that matchup, then boy howdy, they're actually going to inch closer and closer to that regular season championship. And if they win the regular season championship, then my goodness, McKendree made the huge jump, because early on the season McKendree was ranked, and then they kind of had a few bad losses, and it's kind of been a roller coaster ride for McKendree, but for McKendree, they're starting to play really good. They're starting to settle down ever since the loss to Lewis. So I think McKendree is trying to put itself in a prime position to play spoiler to some of these teams. And if they do, we could be seeing them as the regular season championship. regular season champion. Also on Thursday, we have a big-time matchup. We have UCLA at USC. So this is a very important matchup for the Trojans. Because of their blunder against Stanford on the road, USC finds themselves one game back of UCLA. They also lost to Pepperdine earlier in conference play, so now they're going to have to defend Galen Center to the best of their ability. In order to do so, they take on a very challenging UCLA team, which definitely leads the conference with an iron fist and definitely is playing up to their potential. I think for USC, they're going to have to play to the best of their ability. They're going to have to block well. They can hit the ball really well, but their defense has to be on it. They have to dig the ball. They have to block well. They have to serve and pass well. Against UCLA, they're going to have to do all those things if they want to beat the Bruins. Because for USC, they know how big of a matchup this is. This isn't just a rivalry match. It's a huge match which could have big-time MPSF implications. Just because looking at the standings right now, UCLA is 5-1 compared to USC's 4-2. And also USC cannot afford any more losses in the conference just because you have Pepperdine right behind you, even though they have some matches to catch up to when it comes to Grand Canyon, Concordia, and BYU, but still. So for USC, if they want to have a good seeding when it comes to the NCAA tournament, and if they also want to avoid facing Stanford in the first round or any team that could probably upset them, USC is going to have to really pull out the stops against the Bruins. I'm not trying to say USC won't win, but if USC can get one win over UCLA this weekend, yes, spoiler, USC and UCLA are playing each other twice. I think that would be a feather in the Trojans' cap. But in order to do so, they're going to have to play all out against UCLA. Just because UCLA is very talented. And then it's also going to be Coburn versus Coburn. Sam Coburn of USC will be taking on his little brother Kevin. That's going to be a fun little storyline right there. And this kind of will be the big question of, can USC actually contend with some of these other big-time teams? Against Long Beach State, they did a great job in the opening set, but they faltered. Against Ohio State, they kind of fell apart after the second set. And then against Pepperdine, they had their chances, but unfortunately, they kind of got stopped in that fifth set. And then Stanford last weekend was kind of unacceptable, even though Stanford is a good team, especially when playing at Maples. So all in all, for the Trojans, this is very important for them. If UCLA somehow loses, it's not the end of the world for them just because they have a little bit of a cushion, and they're playing some good volleyball. Obviously, last week they didn't really play some MPSF competition, and then the previous week, they had themselves a bye week. But all in all, for UCLA, they're looking really scary right now. And as much as I don't want to admit it as a Long Beach State homer, I think UCLA is the team to beat in the MPSF. And USC fans obviously don't want to hear that, or USC men's volleyball fans don't want to hear it. But for me, I think it is the truth. UCLA has proven this year that they can be the number 1 or number 2 team in the nation, and they can be the number 1 team in the MPSF. Because last I checked, UCLA was chosen to finish second in the conference behind Pepperdine. Now the tables have turned, and UCLA is making all those coaches who picked against them look silly. But I digress on that. So it's a big, important series. It's not just a rivalry match between USC and UCLA. It has conference implications. Expect the Galen Center to be rocking on Thursday. Now, on Friday, we have ourselves the match of the week, the match/series of the week. It's going to be Hawaii at Long Beach State. Now, I was debating on putting for series of the week Long Beach State and Hawaii versus USC and UCLA. But honestly, I think Long Beach State and Hawaii is just as important, just because Long Beach State and Hawaii are both tied for first in the Big West Conference. And Long Beach State got through a very tough Santa Barbara team, which was playing some pretty good volleyball. So, honestly, Hawaii going to Long Beach State is going to be huge. This is going to be the big test for the Rainbow Warriors. Can the Rainbow Warriors win at Long Beach State? I think they can. I think they're starting to get it together. Earlier on, they weren't 100% just because of illnesses and injuries and all that stuff. But I think Hawaii is starting to get it together. I think they're starting to look like a top 5 team. This is a crucial match just because if Hawaii wins both of these matches, they control their own destiny. Same can be said for Long Beach State. Now, if the two teams split, then it comes down to, I want to say it goes down to sets, and then it goes down to points overall scored between the two teams. And then you also have to watch out for UC Santa Barbara as well. The Gauchos are looking at that matchup with both of their eyes from everybody on that program glued to their screens, glued to the box scores, wondering who will come out on top. Because the following week, UC Santa Barbara plays Hawaii, and that is going to be crucial for the Gauchos and for the Rainbow Warriors. So if UC Santa Barbara wants to have any hopes of winning the conference title or the regular season conference title outright, they're going to need some help, and they're also going to need to do what needs to be done against Long Beach State and Hawaii. Obviously, the Gauchos do not have the tiebreaker over Long Beach State, but they could salvage themselves against Hawaii. Hence the word if, Santa Barbara takes care of its stuff when it comes to their things that they can control, and then if they can get a little bit of help from some of the other competition that Long Beach State will face. Because the Big West Conference is no longer a guarantee for some of these teams. You saw what happened with UC San Diego and Hawaii. You saw what happened with UC Irvine and Long Beach State. I don't think the Big West Conference is guaranteed for anybody, not even for Long Beach State or Hawaii. That's the Friday matchups to watch for. Heading on over to the Saturday matchups, it's kind of self-explanatory. USC at UCLA, round 2 between the Bruins and the Trojans. This time it's going to be in Pauley Pavilion. Honestly, for the Bruins and the Trojans, this could make or break one team's conference regular season championship aspirations. Depending on what happens on Thursday depends on what will happen between the Bruins and the Trojans. I think for UCLA, they're going to be comfortable playing at Pauley Pavilion. They've only lost once, which was to Lewis. I think for USC, they know how Pauley Pavilion is. They know how crucial it is to win in that gymnasium, especially since the NCAA finals are going to be there, or the Final Four is going to be there. So for USC, they better get used to Pauley Pavilion just because they're going to be back there sooner if they play their cards right. And this is also a big test for USC to prove if they are a top 5 team. Last week, they obviously lost to Stanford, and now they have a chance to prove that that was just a blip on the radar. The same can be said for UCLA, as they lost to Stanford a few weeks back, and now they have a chance to prove that that was just a blip on the radar. It was just a stumbling in the 5th set. So all in all, for UCLA and USC, this is a crucial series for them, and Saturday's matchup could make or break a team's conference championship hopes of the regular season. And then closing out the matches to watch for is Hawaii at Long Beach State round 2. I hope to be at both of those matchups. For Long Beach State and Hawaii, once again, it's going to be crucial. Whoever wins the first matchup will have a leg up on the other team, and whoever wins both matches controls their own destiny going forward. And it'll be crucial just because if Long Beach State wins, they'll have both wins over Hawaii and both wins over UC Santa Barbara, as they'll basically be 2 games ahead of the Gauchos and the Rainbow Warriors going into their last 4 games, which will be against UC San Diego and Cal State Northridge. But once again, the Big West Conference is never guaranteed. It's not basically a lock for Long Beach State to win the whole shebang in the regular season, even if they win out against Hawaii. So I think it's going to be a barn burner. Obviously, it's a great match between Hawaii and Long Beach State. Charlie Wade and Alan Knipe are both amazing coaches. I really hope to have one if not both of them, on here on Set Point. Well, for Alan Knipe's case, it would be hopefully having him on Set Point again. And then hopefully I'll have Charlie Wade on Set Point in the near future. Remember, if we're doing this traditionally, Hawaii time would be 3 p.m., whereas if I do Set Point on its traditional Monday at 6 p.m., it would be 3 p.m. Hawaii time and then 6 p.m. Pacific time. But all in all, I'm not going to look that far ahead when it comes to that. Back to the Hawaii Long Beach State action. I think it's going to be a barn burner. This will basically be the true test of both teams. The big question for Hawaii is, can they win against Long Beach State without Rado Parupanov? I think I'm pronouncing it right. And can Jakob Tella and Chaz Galloway and the rest of the players just step up? And who will step up for Hawaii now that Rado Parupanov is gone, as well as some of those other players like Patrick Gassman? For Long Beach State, they have a young team. They obviously lost quite a bit to graduation, but their question is, can they rise to the occasion against a big-time opponent like Hawaii? They did so against the Gauchos, but now Hawaii is a whole different animal. So we'll see what happens. And I imagine Hawaii will be bringing quite a bit of its fans. They always have a big crowd when it comes to Hawaii Long Beach State, but so does Long Beach State and its crowd. It's probably going to be deafening when it comes to cheers, when it comes to the Pyramid. And that's why I'm so excited for this matchup. And I'm hoping to attend both matches. I have to get on the horn right away and secure my seat at the media table. But that is going to do it for the Week 13 matches to watch for. And ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for Set Point. It is that time, ladies and gentlemen, to drop the beat, because I'm about to dip like a banana in chocolate. You feel me? Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Set Point. I really appreciate you all tuning in. If you tuned in live, I appreciate you. If you tuned in on playback, I appreciate you. If you tuned in at work, I appreciate you. If you tuned in at any point of the day while the show went on, I appreciate you. Big shout out to the chat room, Courtney Harden, Larry B, and Adam Kardec. I really appreciate you all tuning in, even if it was 4 bits. I really do appreciate you. I appreciate everyone's support of Set Point, because without you, Set Point and IE Sports Radio would not be anything. For everyone here at IE Sports Radio, this is Teran Rodriguez signing off. You all have yourselves a great rest of the week. Enjoy the volleyball action. We have quite a bit of it. Even the high school volleyball season is on and popping like popcorn. And I will see you Friday and Saturday for Hawaii Long Beach State men's volleyball. And I'll see you Saturday for the SoCal Supreme Sports Show. Peace!